Chapter 11. Debbie's Story. Excuse me, ladies? A shift change at the restaurant bar heralded a new server for the five women who had apparently staked a claim on that corner table. I hesitated to come over because I saw you were busy, but no worries, said Debbie, the first to break from the embrace. I'm guessing you want to get our dinner order? Kind of, yeah. This server was a bit more reluctant than the last. You all have had this table for almost 2 hours, and if you don't order at least another round of drinks, I kind of have to bring you your check and ask you to either move to the dining room or just kind of, go because we need the table. She looked at her feet in anticipation of a response. Okay, did you bring menus? Debbie was upbeat and amenable to the idea of ordering. Oh, I forgot. I'll be right back. Do you want another round of drinks? It was Beth's turn. Absolutely. Bring it on. Yes, ma'am. The server turned around and started toward the bar. She stopped in her tracks and turned back toward the table, squinting, attempting to see the tiny number on the side of the table. The bartender had a record of what the order was, and she didn't want to go back and ask. As it was only her second day on the job, she didn't want to make any huge mistakes. Linda finally gathered herself, wiping her eyes with a damp cocktail napkin. Wow, that felt good. Oh, how I look forward to seeing you guys when we're away from home. I know we can see each other any time during the year, but for some reason, these getaways are like a catharsis. I love you guys. I know what you mean, Lynn, Debbie jumped in. Especially lately, I've been absolutely crawling inside my own skin, counting the seconds until this week. Every time we turn on the news, I just cringe with what's been going on. Jerry and I have been fighting constantly because of what's been going on in Washington. And to compound things, the quote, war on opioids that this fakakta president promised us is bupkis. Julie had absolutely no idea what Debbie was talking about. She knew very little about either of these two remaining storytellers. She was also wondering what kind of story to be expecting from her. Debbie's problem, Julie had decided, was either politics or drugs, neither of which presented difficulties for her in her marriage, her children, or her life. She wriggled around in her chair and attempted to get comfortable, but realized she needed to use the restroom. Wait, Debbie, before you start, would you mind if I made a quick trip to the ladies' room? Rachel stood up in tandem and nodded. Sounds like a good idea to me. Why don't we decide on dinner and go in shifts, and then we'll do Debbie. If she comes back, just order me the Cobb salad with extra blue cheese dressing. Oh, okay, Linda added. Julie picked up the menu that the server had just dropped off at the table and glanced through it. If this is my last supper, I'm doing it upright. I'm having everything I always deny myself to protect my health and waistline, damn it. If I'm not back, please order a rare New York strip with a baked potato with everything and Caesar salad. Wow, girl, no holding back for you. Rachel put her arm around Julie as they made their way through the aisle toward the bar area where the restrooms were. I guess you don't have to worry about your weight, huh? Those of us in the market still have to watch those carbs. Rachel threw her head back and spewed her New York chortle. No, I just try never to diet when I'm on vacation. There, that sounded reasonable enough. As they swung the ladies' room door open, the conversation stopped cold. A young woman was in the corner with her back to them, leaning against the wall. She was reaching up to her left arm with her right and suddenly snapped a piece of tubing from her arm. Julie and Rachel went directly to their respective stalls, did what they had to, and then silently emerged. The girl was gone. I'm just glad it was us and not Debbie that came in just then. Rachel was whispering, not sure if they were alone. Why? Julie had no idea. I imagine you'll find out when she tells her story. Rachel finished washing her hands and smacked her hand on the electric hand dryer button. I hate these things. They never dry your hands completely. I guess so, Julie surmised. They're still better than killing trees for paper towels. Women are such slobs in public restrooms, don't you think? She didn't know if Rachel was listening, but she continued. I mean, first they are so wasteful, and then they throw towels all over the floor. And don't get me started about some of the shit I've come across with sanitary stuff. Ugh. Emerging from the restroom, both women found themselves both doing cursory glances around the bar to see if they could spot the girl from the ladies' room. Neither were successful, so they made their way back to the table. So, are we ordered? Not only are we ordered, but she brought our drinks as well, said Linda as she climbed out from behind the table. She reached back, picked up her beer, and took a small sip. Julie girl, I'm glad you suggested a pee break. Everybody knows you only rent beer, and it's definitely payback time. Julie tried to laugh. She wasn't sure if it was okay to laugh yet. That was some little story and some eruption at the end. I thought all middle aged women could relate to that, didn't even think about the beer. Linda, Debbie, and Beth headed off to the ladies' room. Rachel and Julie shimmied back into their chairs, silently sipping on their refreshed drinks. So, Rachel, is it like this every year when you get together? I mean, do you guys go through this much intense talking, crying, and all every time you get together? Rachel sat back. I'm sorry. This wasn't fair to you. We do this one evening every year when we get together. It's kind of like a cleansing of sorts. We get each other, and we always have each other's backs. Rachel took a sip from her wine. I guess we should have prepared you better and then maybe given you more of a choice as to whether you wanted to join us or not. She stopped and reframed her thought. But the rest of the time, we have a terrific time. A lot of laughs, a lot of fun. Hey, listen, if you want, you can cut out. I'm sure everyone would understand. Join us for dinner tomorrow night. She stopped, studying Julie's face for a reaction. Julie was in awe of these women. Actually, I think you girls are remarkable. I'm not sure I'm even going to be here tomorrow, but you know what? I'm enjoying this opportunity to get to know you, and really, this is so much better than eating dinner alone in my room tonight. Julie held her breath in hopes that Rachel wouldn't ask where she was going or why she wouldn't be here for dinner tomorrow. It really is an intense experience. I should have told you that we get into some pretty serious stuff. But you know, we have a very special relationship. Believe it or not, Linda doesn't always talk about her cancer or her mother. We end up talking about whatever issue is at the very base of our anger or pain at the moment. She pondered for a moment, and then, as if it was an afterthought, she added more. Last year, Linda took her whole time talking about the fact that her neighborhood was trying to be annexed by a nearby city, and it just wasn't going to work. She was so animated and aggravated that she almost forgot to tell us that she had celebrated 2 years clean from cancer last year. Wait, did she even mention she had 3 years when she was talking? No, really, 3 years is great. Julie had a friend who just went through the same thing, but certainly wasn't nearly as forthcoming with all the emotion that Linda had just shared. So, what triggered all of this tonight? She probably had another fight with her mother, probably about not seeing her while she was here in Florida, something like that. Rachel spoke confidently. She knew her friend well. Shh, here they come. The three women returning from the ladies' room were doing so, full of giggles and groans. Linda is back to herself again, girls, Debbie affirmed. She was busy telling really bad jokes in the restroom, and then we heard some girl repeating the same stupid joke to her friends at the bar as we passed by. Debbie let out one of her snorts. I pity the rest of those bar patrons. Not my fault if you're too slow to pick up on the punchline. Linda slinked back into her seat. All right, Miss Debbie, your turn to spill your guts. Let's go. Where do I begin? Let me start on the lighter side, since Julie mentioned that she doesn't diet when she's on vacation. I have a cute food story. The first time I went grocery shopping after both my kids were gone was the first real reality check. I had been used to buying a lot of snacks and large quantities of other foods, enough to feed an army. We had raised two teenagers, after all, and they would bring their friends home with them. My cooking became legendary at their high school. It became known as Debbie food, affectionately named by a neighborhood kid who happened to dine with us on a regular basis. I never knew how many teenagers would be at my table from one night to the next. Go figure from there. Let me turn back the pages a little bit. Cooking for a young family was relatively easy, except for the fact that I was working full-time. I'd get home at dinner hour, but since their preference when they were little was fish sticks or chicken nuggets, although I wasn't too comfortable with the nutritional value, it was a quick fix. I had gone as far as serving the macaroni and cheese from the infamous blue box. I cringed when I read the ingredients of the powdered cheese mix. I really did believe in healthy eating. I did. As luck would have it, one day they asked for macaroni and cheese, and I didn't have any of the instant dinner in the house. I did, however, have a block of New York sharp cheddar, plenty of milk, and a box of elbow macaroni. I proceeded to prepare a casserole for my family the way my mother did, by making a medium white sauce, stirring in the grated cheese, adding the cooked macaroni, and then baking the mixture. They loved it. To this day, I can't make anything from a box. Anything. No cake mixes, no frozen French fries, no instant rice, no canned vegetables, no bottled dressings or sauces. I even make my own chocolate eclairs from scratch. They left for college, and I got lazy. The problem was that for the first few weeks, I continued to shop at places like Costco and BJ's and purchased enormous amounts of food. That might account for the unusual amount of weight gain that followed. I'm reminded of the time my husband came home with some peanut butter. I asked him where the other jar was since it was a buy one, get one free deal. He looked at me innocently and said, "We don't eat that much peanut butter." My feeling was that it was free. Might as well bring it home. It wouldn't go to waste. Our pantry is thinner now, and so are we, for a lot of reasons. I'm still cooking, all from scratch, all fresh foods, but dinner time is extremely quiet. And you know what? I guess we really don't eat that much peanut butter after all. All four of the women smiled and laughed cautiously. Julie tried to gauge their reaction. She glanced over at Debbie and surmised that her story was not a pleasant one, as she abruptly took on a very serious tone. Let me start with Jerry. We are barely speaking to each other right now. In fact, I think he was so glad to get rid of me, he drove me to the airport. We didn't say a word to each other the whole way, but I think he just wanted to be sure I was leaving. Nobody was sure whether to laugh as Debbie continued in a very serious manner. What she said was rather funny, though. Since nobody else flinched, Julie sat quietly and listened. If you remember last year, I told you all that we were fighting tooth and nail about our illustrious president. You know, Jerry's still trying to defend the guy. I just wish the whole investigation would be over already. But somehow Jerry will come back with this left-wing deep state conspiracy and won't accept the findings of the special counsel. Even after all that has come out and knowing what he knows about me and my past, he still defends the guy. Now, Julie was dying to know what Debbie meant by her past, but didn't dare open her mouth. Did she have something to do with politics? Did she have some kind of bad experience with the president? Or with some other man? What? Damn. She just continued to listen. I'm especially angered about the fact that the bastard talks out of both sides of his mouth. He claims he's going to do everything in his power, and then changing her voice into a mocking tone, "And I alone can do it," she spewed. Debbie stopped. Even she had to laugh at herself. Absolutely nothing has happened to stop the flow of opioids into this country. Dumbass Donald thinks building that fucking wall will make a difference. Doesn't know that the fentanyl, the synthetic shit that's killing our kids, is being mailed into this country from China, for God's sakes. Stopping to take a drink, Debbie was just getting started. And then he turns around and attempts to destroy Obamacare. And by the way, anything that has Obama's name on it, basically eliminating coverage for addiction care. And that's only because they couldn't repeal it because they had nothing to replace it with that was any better. Hey, get off the soapbox and tell your damn story, interrupted Rachel. Sorry, I get my underwear tied in a knot over this so fast. Debbie took a deep breath and tried to gather her thoughts to begin again. Jerry and I have been so busy fighting about all of this that we hardly noticed what was going on around us. Debbie stopped. Nobody moved. Nobody even took a breath. Everyone except Julie seemed to know what was coming. Debbie dropped her head. Under her breath, she started slowly. His car was parked in the driveway when we got home. We had been to see the marriage counselor once again, so there was surreal thickness in the air inside the car. We had just spent the last hour screaming at each other, saying horrible things to each other. Neither one of us had the energy to talk after the session on the way home anyway, but we both noticed the car. She picked up her head and arms and rested her chin in her hands. After she settled her elbows close to the edge of the table, we walked up to the house in single file, past the car, and went into the house. I called out to Alex, but he didn't answer. Nikki called out to tell me he wasn't home yet. She took a deep breath. At that moment, Jerry's and my eyes met. We didn't have to speak. We ran back outside, tripping over each other. I already had my hand in my purse, fumbling around, looking for the Narcan, praying it wasn't too late. Julie hung on every word, her eyes fixed on Debbie. The other women were fiddling with their drinks, sipping and fidgeting with straws and napkins. They had heard this part before and were tentative in their reactions. Jerry got to the driver's side of the car first, as he always did. His patience with Alex was growing thin. This, if he had indeed overdosed, would be the third time for Alex. And in Jerry's baseball lingo and in keeping with his tough love attitude, it would be 3 strikes and he's out. Debbie swallowed hard. I guess he thinks I was the enabler because I wasn't as hard on Alex. Because I didn't want to throw him out on the streets, I'm somehow the bad guy in all of this. Debbie stopped and realized she was talking more about her disdain for her husband than she was about the story itself. When she reached to pick up her drink, it had been sitting long enough to develop condensation on the outside so that she didn't get a good grip. The glass slipped through her fingers like a bald tire on black ice. Startled by the sound and the splash, the girls jumped up from the table to avoid getting wet. "Waste not, want not," laughed Rachel. Julie was appalled at the lack of reverence by these women, at the seriousness of the story being told by their dear friend. They were laughing at the expression used by Rachel, commenting how their mothers used the same when they spilled as kids. They were motioning for another drink for Debbie and napkins. Nobody even seemed to care that Debbie's son might have overdosed on a drug and might be dead. "I'm such a clod," Debbie chimed in. She also stood, brushing the liquid from her pants. She began to laugh, too. Julie then realized that this, too, was an older story. Her next thought took her a million miles away again. How did these girls get past all these problems? They act as if nothing is wrong, and look at what they faced. I gotta find out the rest of this story. Thank God Sophie and Allie never got messed up on serious drugs. I remember the time they came home from that party, a little high from smoking dope. I couldn't even condemn them because they asked if I had ever done it. I wasn't the type of parent to lie to my kids, so I told them the truth, that I had smoked a little in college, but after having a really bad experience one time, I swore I would never do it again. Someone had laced the stuff with something, and I ended up at the infirmary with hallucinations and shit. We never did figure out what it was. Nobody else had a problem, so the doctor told me it might just have been some kind of anxiety attack. I never believed in that stuff. To this day, I blame the pot. Oh, now, that's better. Debbie sat back down in a dry chair in front of a dry table setting with a fresh drink. Jerry grabbed the door handle and swung the door open. Apparently, Alex had passed out and was leaning against it, and the only thing that kept him from falling out was that he still had his seatbelt on. She glanced around the table. What junkie shoots up wearing a seatbelt? I guess we did something right when we taught him auto safety. She laughed. The other girls did as well. Julie was now extremely uncomfortable. She squirmed around in her seat, and a deep furrow formed at her brow. I got there just as Jerry sat him back up and was taking his pulse at his neck. He reached back and yelled at me to give him the Narcan. I took the lid off, reminding him to be careful where he touches him because he wasn't wearing gloves. Debbie rolled her eyes. My hero. He always dove into things without thinking. You all know that if he were exposed, he could get sick, too. Sometimes he's such an ass. Debbie reached for her glass, this time with a napkin in her hand. So before he got the Narcan even near him, Alex woke up. He started pulling away from Jerry, yelling at him to cut it out, that he didn't need any of that shit, that he was fine. She took a long sip of her drink. Jerry was so pissed off, telling him to shut up, that he would wake the neighbors and asking him how the hell was he supposed to know. It's not exactly like he had an angelic history. Debbie took another sip and put the drink down. See, that's the difference between Jerry and me. I trusted Alex, and he didn't. That time, he was just tired and had been talking on his cell to his girlfriend and simply fell asleep. Or at least that's what he said. I believed him. Jerry didn't. Debbie softly shook her head. I hate to admit it, but Jerry turned out to be right, in the long run. It was then that the other girls ceased their fiddling, got silent, and paid extreme attention. Nobody wanted to ask a question. Nobody moved a muscle. Debbie put her glass down. I have been off the grid for the past few months for a reason. She slid the damp cocktail napkin from under her drink and wiped her mouth and then her brow. The reason is, she faltered. Hey, come on, Linda coaxed her. It's us, remember? It's so hard to comprehend. But both Alex and Nikki are in treatment right now. Debbie began to weep. Her words became stilted and stiff. Alex relapsed after 4 years of being clean, and it was Nikki that was behind it. She began to shake uncontrollably. Linda and Rachel, who were sitting on either side of her, draped an arm around Debbie as she cried. It was as if her body was imploding into the chair and she was disappearing in front of their eyes. Linda spoke first. They'll be okay, Deb. They can beat this. Alex proved it once. Rachel picked it up. Are they together? I mean, did they go to the same rehab place? Debbie gathered herself enough to answer. No, the counselor didn't think that was a good idea. Alex went back to the facility where he got clean the first time. She hesitated. We sent Nikki to a place up in Canada that is for women only. Jerry felt strongly that she shouldn't be distracted by a bunch of druggy young men who would be trying to score. She was able at that point to smile. He does know his daughter. Beth had a different question. Had Nikki had an overdose? Nikki was actually new to the drug world. She had thrown her back out at a gymnastics meet during her senior year. Dumbass doctor started her on muscle relaxers, physical therapy, and that fucking Oxycontin. He never bothered to ask anyone if there were any addiction problems in the family. God, Jerry wants to sue him for malpractice. That same sneer came over her face that was there when she was talking about their political differences. He thinks you accomplish everything by bullying. When Nikki asked for the third refill, he wouldn't give it to her, telling her she shouldn't be needing anything more than Tylenol for pain by then. She stopped again. Beth asked another question. So is Jerry going to sue, or did your cooler head prevail? He's still yammering about it. It's not the doctor's fault that she's addicted to heroin. He took her off the Oxycontin after 2 refills. It wasn't an egregious overuse of the drug. I mean, we should have been the ones that were more vigilant, knowing what we know about Alex. I mean, we're not stupid. We've not really been helicoptering parents, but we have always been attentive to our kids. Addiction is a disease, you know, Rachel volunteered. Nobody is at fault here. Your kids are sick, that's all, and you treat them as if they had any other disease. They get the medicine, the therapy, the attention, the whatever. Julie noticed that Rachel had a way of simplifying everything anyone talked about. Her demeanor was always calm, yet sometimes condescending. Julie was trying to figure out why. Is she feeling guilty? Does she think that her problems aren't as bad? Is it some kind of survivor's guilt? I mean, Rachel did lose her husband, but she created her own problems before that. What's her game? Debbie began to weep softly again. At least the political shit took a backseat. The only time it even rears its ugly head now is when the asshole starts squawking about repealing and replacing Obamacare. I swear those damn politicians are such children. Ever since Mitch McConnell opened his trap when Obama was elected and said they were going to do everything they could to be sure he only served 1 term. Her voice trailed off, and she again began to weep in earnest. Mental health care has always been treated like a second-class citizen in this country, partly because of the stigma of it, and partly because healthcare itself has always been determined by men, who are too fucking stubborn to seek help when it comes to things like depression. It just isn't manly. They say things like man up or grow some balls. It was Rachel who was on her soapbox this time, but the women all agreed. Look, I don't like to get into the politics stuff because you know I'm a conservative, but I do get that healthcare cannot be fixed by one party. These children in Congress have to learn to work together. Finally, Rachel has come to see things realistically about politics. Beth never got involved in these conversations because the girls told her several years ago that she was so far to the left she might fall off. I won't bring up how I really feel, but thank God you agree that this is a bipartisan issue. Debbie stopped crying. Please, girls, don't. I get enough of this at home. She wiped her eyes. The bottom line is Alex was able to go back to his rehab center for a small fee for food and incidentals. For Nikki, we had to pay the entire fee, but the insurance no longer covers very much of it thanks to, in part, the orange asshole. I'm sorry, the president. She took the last gulp of her bourbon and hesitated to call the server over to the table. You guys ready for another? If we do, we'll have fresh drinks when dinner comes. Yeah, sure, why not? Linda was ready for another beer. She motioned for the server with one hand, holding her empty glass up with the other. What does that make now? 4? Boy, are we moving fast tonight. Alex had a tough time detoxing. They told us in the family group meetings that usually when someone relapses like he did, they don't just start using again. They start right where they left off. Julie was confused. She knew absolutely nothing about illegal drug use or abuse. She barely knew anything about addiction. She knew a little about drinking too much and drinking to take the edge off and drinking her emotional pain away. Wait, does that mean I have a problem? Am I going down a bad road here? What exactly does that mean? It means that when he started using again, he was right back into heavy use, that just a little wasn't nearly enough, and within a few days he was on the streets, stealing from us and doing just about anything to support his habit. And Nikki was enabling him because she felt guilty for giving him that first rock. What's a rock? Julie was in the dark about the vernacular. When she was in school, she knew people who snorted coke, shot heroin, and did LSD on stamps or something. Dismissively, Rachel snapped, It's how they smoke coke. Rachel then gently kicked Julie under the table, rendering her mute for any more questions. Once they got through detox, Alex did much better, having been through the program once before. Nikki, however, is still balking at it. She's, I guess, in denial of the fact that she's an addict. Debbie was getting restless. She drummed her manicured nails on the edge of the table as she crafted her next thought. Tentatively, she began. My biggest issue right now is that Alex wants nothing to do with Nikki right now. He blames her for everything that is wrong in his life now because she's the one that brought home the coke that led to his relapse. He could have said no, couldn't he? Julie sounded so innocent, as if she was a child learning something for the first time. I mean, wasn't it his choice to use it or not? Ha, girl, you have a lot to learn about addiction. Debbie took on a solemn tone. She stared Julie down for what seemed like an eternity. Are you an ostrich? Do you not watch the news? I know the airwaves have been flooded with stories about the opioid crisis, and there isn't much said about cocaine anymore, but come on, wake up! Debbie had raised her voice and was near screaming. Believe me, honey, if you have kids, you better be paying attention. Realizing she hit a raw nerve, Julie slithered down in her chair, a horrified expression plastered across her face. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. Visibly shaken, she stared straight ahead, deciding at that point to keep her thoughts to herself for the rest of the evening. I don't know these women. I keep putting my foot in my mouth and hurting feelings. They all have had life experiences I know nothing about, personalities I have no knowledge of, and relationships I need to stop trying to horn in on. Geez, I really am a worthless piece of shit. Hey, wait. It's me that should be sorry. Debbie finally responded. You had no idea what you were getting into, and it wasn't fair of me to bite your head off. Debbie reached over and rested her hand on Julie's arm to reassure her of her sincerity. I mean it, Julie, please, don't take any of us too seriously tonight. In fact, if you'll promise to meet us tomorrow and join us for dinner tomorrow night, it'll be a whole different kind of night. Julie simply nodded. I'll think about it. I may not still be here, but if I am, I will. I'm still not going to add anything to the conversation. I just can't. These chicks are really bringing me down.